The ticket was taped to the windshield at 2:47 p.m. $150. Expired meter. Vehicle parked for 4 hours in a 2-hour zone outside Rhode Island Hospital Cancer Center. Jessica Rivera, 14, sat at the defendant's table, clutching the citation. Her mother's car, her mother's ticket, but her mother wasn't there to fight it. She couldn't be. Maria Rivera was 3 floors up, still in recovery from an 8-hour cancer surgery that was supposed to take 2. Stage 3. Emergency complications. Jessica had waited in the car because the surgical ward was full and minors weren't allowed to wait unaccompanied in the recovery area. She'd been too afraid to leave, too afraid her mother would wake up asking for her and she wouldn't be there. Parking officer Todd Marshall, 38, sat in the gallery checking his watch. Simple violation. 4 hours is 4 hours. Rules are rules. Behind Jessica sat her aunt, Carmen Rivera, 41, holding a folder of hospital documents and a crumpled tissue. Carmen's hand rested on her niece's shoulder. And Judge Frank Caprio was about to discover that Officer Marshall had written 47 tickets outside this same cancer center in 6 months, targeting families during medical crises, and that Jessica's $150 citation would expose a performance metric system that turned human tragedy into municipal revenue. But first, he needed to understand why a 14-year-old girl was defending her mother's parking ticket alone. Will the rules crush compassion today? Is this just 4 hours means 4 hours? Or will something bigger come to light when a child stands in court while her mother recovers from surgery 3 floors away? If you're watching from Providence, from a hospital waiting room, from anywhere someone you love has fought for their life, comment below and let us know. Subscribe to Order in the Court so you don't miss stories like this. We share these cases every day because sometimes justice looks like a judge who sees past the paperwork. Wednesday, 10:45 a.m., Providence Municipal Court. The morning docket was routine until the clerk called the case that would change hospital parking enforcement across Rhode Island. Rivera, Maria, citation 4782B, expired meter, hospital zone. Jessica Rivera stood. She wore jeans and a hoodie that looked slept in, dark circles under her eyes, hands trembling slightly as she held the yellow citation. She looked exhausted in the way only someone who spent weeks in hospital hallways can look. Aunt Carmen stood behind her, one hand on the folder, the other steadying her niece. Officer Marshall remained seated in the gallery, arms crossed. He'd written hundreds of these tickets. This was taking too long. Judge Frank Caprio looked up from the citation, and his expression shifted immediately. He saw the defendant's age before he read the name. "Good morning," he said gently. "Please have a seat." Jessica sat. Carmen remained standing behind her. Frank read the citation carefully. Vehicle registered to Maria Rivera. Toyota Camry, 2011. Location, Hospital Street, metered zone outside Rhode Island Hospital Cancer Center. Date, October 14. Time issued, 2:47 p.m. Duration, 4 hours, 12 minutes. Fine, $150. He looked at Jessica. "This ticket is in your mother's name. The vehicle is registered to Maria Rivera. Why are you here instead of your mother?" Jessica's voice was quiet but steady. "My mom can't come, Your Honor. She's in the hospital. She has surgery. She's still there." "I'm sorry to hear that." Frank's tone was kind. "What kind of surgery?" "Cancer surgery. It was supposed to be 2 hours, but there were complications. It took 8 hours. I waited in the car because they said I couldn't wait in the surgical area by myself, and there was no room in the waiting area." She'd been too afraid to leave, too afraid her mother would wake up asking for her and she wouldn't be there. Frank looked at the ticket again. Vehicle parked 4 hours, 12 minutes. Meter limit, 2 hours. He looked at the location. Cancer Center. He looked at Officer Marshall in the gallery. Officer Marshall, you issued this citation? Todd stood. Yes, Your Honor. Vehicle was parked well beyond the meter limit. 4 hours in a 2-hour zone. That's a violation regardless of circumstances. Did you see anyone in the vehicle when you issued the citation? I saw a kid in the back seat. Looked like she was on her phone. Doesn't change the violation. You saw a child alone in a car for 4 hours outside a hospital and you wrote a ticket? Todd's tone became defensive. My job is to enforce parking regulations, not investigate why people overstay. If everyone had an excuse, meters would be meaningless. Frank set the citation down. Officer Marshall, how many tickets have you written in the hospital zone in the past 6 months? I don't keep count. I work my assigned zones. Bailiff Rodriguez, please pull Officer Marshall's citation records for the past 6 months. I want every ticket issued within 2 blocks of Rhode Island Hospital. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Someone whispered something about quotas. Officer Marshall's jaw tightened. 20 minutes passed. Jessica sat quietly, Carmen's hand still on her shoulder. Officer Marshall checked his phone twice. Frank reviewed other cases, but his focus kept returning to the yellow citation on his desk. Bailiff Rodriguez returned with the printed report. He read it in silence. His expression darkened with every page.
Officer Marshall, in the past 6 months, you've written 127 parking citations in the hospital zone. Of those, 47 were issued directly outside the cancer center. Most were for vehicles parked 3 to 5 hours beyond the meter limit. He looked up. That's an average of 8 tickets per month at a single cancer treatment facility. Todd shifted his weight. That zone has high turnover and frequent violations. It has families dealing with medical emergencies. Frank picked up his phone. Bailiff, please connect me to the patient advocate office at Rhode Island Hospital. I'd like to speak with them on speakerphone. The gallery was silent now. Jessica looked at her aunt, confused. Carmen squeezed her shoulder. The call connected. A woman's voice filled the courtroom. Patient advocate office, this is Susan Chen. Miss Chen, this is Judge Frank Caprio from Providence Municipal Court. I have a case here involving a parking citation issued outside your cancer center. Can you tell me the typical duration of appointments and procedures at that facility? Susan's response was immediate and detailed. Initial consultations run 2 to 3 hours. Chemotherapy sessions range from 3 to 6 hours, depending on the protocol. Surgical procedures can take anywhere from 2 to 8 hours, sometimes longer if there are complications. We always advise families to expect procedures to run longer than scheduled because medical situations are unpredictable. And parking availability? Susan's frustration was audible. It's a nightmare, Your Honor. We have 40 spaces for a 200-bed facility. The meters outside are 2-hour maximum. We've been requesting that the city extend the time limits or create medical validation zones for years, but nothing has changed. Meanwhile, families get ticketed while their loved ones are in surgery or undergoing treatment. It adds financial stress to what's already the worst time of their lives. Thank you, Miss Chen. Frank ended the call and looked at Officer Marshall. You've been systematically ticketing families during medical emergencies. The hospital's own patient advocate confirms that cancer procedures regularly exceed 2 hours, sometimes by 6 hours or more. You knew vehicles parked outside that facility likely belonged to families dealing with life-threatening situations. Did you ever check with the hospital before writing a ticket? That's not part of my protocol. Did you ever ask yourself why a child was sitting alone in a car for 4 hours? I'm not required to investigate circumstances. The meter limit is 2 hours. The vehicle exceeded that limit. I wrote the citation. You wrote 47 of them at a cancer center. A voice from the gallery, quiet but clear. My husband had chemo there last month. I got a ticket. I was inside holding his hand while the drugs made him sick. I paid it. I didn't know I could fight. Another voice. My mother. Surgery. 6 hours. $150 ticket. I paid it. Frank raised his hand gently. I understand. Please, let's continue on the record. He turned to Carmen. Miss Rivera, you have documentation from the hospital? Yes, Your Honor. Admission records, surgical reports, timeline of that day. Frank reviewed the documents. His expression grew colder with each page. October 14, 10:23 a.m. Maria Rivera admitted for emergency surgery, tumor rupture, internal bleeding, life-threatening. 10:45 a.m. Jessica Rivera, age 14, informed she cannot remain in surgical ward, minor, unaccompanied, liability restrictions, waiting room at capacity, advised to wait in vehicle or return later. 11 a.m. Surgery begins, estimated duration 2 hours. 2:47 p.m. Citation issued by Officer T. Marshall, vehicle parked 3 hours 47 minutes. 3:15 p.m. Surgery continues. 7 p.m. Surgery ends, Maria Rivera stable, critical condition. 7:30 p.m. Jessica Rivera permitted to see mother in recovery. Frank read the surgical notes aloud. Tumor rupture, emergency intervention, complications requiring extended procedure. 8 hours to save Maria Rivera's life while her 14-year-old daughter waited alone in a parking lot, too terrified to leave, too young to wait inside. And at 2:47 p.m., in the middle of that nightmare, a parking officer wrote a $150 ticket. Frank's voice was quiet, but every word carried weight. Officer Marshall, while this child's mother was on an operating table fighting for her life, while Jessica was alone in a car praying her mother would survive, you issued a citation? Is that correct? Todd's face flushed. I didn't know the situation. You didn't ask. You saw a child alone in a vehicle for hours outside a cancer facility, and instead of checking if she needed help, you wrote a ticket. Silence. Bailiff, please contact the Providence Parking Authority. I want to speak with the director. I want to know if officers work under quotas or performance metrics and whether Officer Marshall has been specifically assigned to hospital zones. Within an hour, Michael Foster, 52, director of the Providence Parking Authority, arrived looking uncomfortable. Director Foster, Frank began, does your department operate under quota system? Not quotas, Your Honor, performance metrics. Officers are expected to issue a minimum number of citations per shift to justify operational costs. How many? 15 citations per 8-hour shift. And Officer Marshall? He consistently exceeds expectations. He averages 22 citations per shift. By targeting hospital zones? The hospital zone has high citation potential due to meter violations. It has desperate families who can't leave their cars because their loved ones are in surgery. Frank pulled up the data. 47 tickets outside the cancer center alone. Average fine $150. Total revenue $7,050 from families dealing with cancer. How much of that revenue factors into Officer Marshall's performance evaluation? Officers receive annual reviews based on citation numbers. It affects their standing and eligibility for advancement. So he's incentivized to write tickets regardless of circumstances, to target families during medical crises because they can't move their vehicles, to ignore common sense because performance metrics matter more than compassion? Michael had no response. Frank's decision was immediate and unequivocal. This citation is dismissed. Jessica, you and your mother owe nothing. He looked at Director Foster. I am ordering a review of all 47 citations issued by Officer Marshall outside the cancer center in the past 6 months. Families who paid those fines are to be refunded in full. I am recommending, and I want this on the record, that the parking authority eliminate performance metrics tied to citation counts, create a medical validation program with Rhode Island Hospital, and require officers to consult with patient advocates before citing vehicles that appear parked beyond meter limits at medical facilities. He looked at Officer Marshall. You are suspended pending an internal investigation into whether you deliberately targeted vulnerable populations. He turned to Jessica. His voice softened. Jessica, I'm sorry you had to go through this while your mother was in surgery. You did nothing wrong. Your mother did nothing wrong. This system failed you, and that's on us, not you.
Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Your Honor. We couldn't afford the $150. Mom's medical bills are already over $60,000. I didn't know what to do." Carmen pulled her niece close. 3 weeks later, Officer Todd Marshall was terminated. The internal investigation found he had strategically targeted hospital zones because they generated high citation volumes with minimal effort. Cars parked beyond meter limits, drivers inside unable to feed meters, easy revenue. He'd known most vehicles belonged to families in crisis. He'd shown no discretion. In his termination interview, he showed no remorse. "I enforce the rules as written. If the city wanted exceptions, they should have put them in writing." The other 46 families who'd received tickets outside the cancer center were contacted. All fines refunded. Many had paid months earlier, unable to fight while caring for loved ones undergoing cancer treatment. One woman, Patricia Morrison, had paid her $150 ticket the same week her husband entered hospice. "I didn't have the energy to fight. My husband had days to live. A parking ticket was just one more cruelty in a series of cruelties." She got her money back. Small comfort, but something. The city of Providence faced public pressure to reform. Within 2 months, changes were implemented. Meters near hospitals extended from 2 hours to 4. Medical parking zones created with hospital validation. Officers required to check with patient advocates before ticketing vehicles near medical facilities that appear abandoned beyond meter limits. Performance metrics eliminated. Officers now evaluated on community service and professionalism, not citation volume.
Rhode Island Hospital installed a validation system. Families dealing with emergencies, long procedures, or extended visits could get parking validated at no cost. No more choosing between being present for a loved one and feeding a meter. The changes came too late for Jessica and 46 other families, but they would protect thousands of future families from the same trauma. Jessica Rivera is now 15. Her mother, Maria, is still alive. The surgery was successful. She's in remission, fragile, but fighting. "When I got that ticket, I wanted to cry," Jessica says now. "Mom was in surgery. I didn't know if she'd survive. I was 14, alone in a parking lot, terrified. Then there's a $150 ticket on the windshield." She pauses. "We couldn't afford it, but I didn't know you could fight a ticket. I thought you just paid." Carmen sits beside her. "I was furious. My sister was fighting for her life, and they ticketed her car with her daughter inside. It was cruel. So I gathered the hospital records and we went to court." Maria Rivera, now 43, keeps the dismissed citation in a folder with her hospital discharge papers. "These represent the same day," she explains. "The day I almost died. The day Jessica waited alone. The day someone saw our crisis and wrote a ticket. And the day months later when Judge Caprio said, 'No, that's wrong,' and made it right." Frank Caprio keeps Jessica's citation in his chambers, the yellow slip that started everything. $150, 4 hours, cancer center. Todd Marshall looked at that car and saw a violation, Frank tells visitors. "I looked at the same citation and saw a 14-year-old girl waiting to find out if her mother would live. Those are two very different things." He holds up the ticket. "This represents everything wrong with turning human suffering into revenue. Jessica's mother was in surgery. Jessica was alone and terrified. The city's response was a $150 fine. That's not law enforcement. That's a failure of compassion." Frank was later recognized by patient advocacy groups for exposing the hospital parking scheme. In interviews, he was direct. "Parking rules exist to manage limited space fairly, but when someone's mother is in cancer surgery, fairness means understanding that feeding a meter is impossible. Jessica couldn't leave that car. What if her mother had died while she was at a meter? What if the hospital called and she wasn't there? A child shouldn't have to choose between being available for her dying mother and avoiding a parking ticket." He held up the stack of dismissed citations.
These represent 47 families dealing with cancer, surgery, treatment, and death. We ticketed them. We added financial stress to medical trauma. That's not governance. That's failing people when they need help most. Jessica's $150 ticket became a symbol. Patient advocacy groups use it in presentations. Hospital administrators reference it when lobbying for reforms. Ethics courses for parking officers cite it as an example of how rules without compassion become cruelty. Providence's reforms inspired 12 other cities to review hospital zone enforcement. Boston eliminated meters within 1 block of major hospitals. Hartford created free medical parking with validation. New Haven extended meter times to 6 hours near medical facilities. The changes came from Jessica's courage, a 14-year-old who could have paid the fine and stayed silent. Instead, with her aunt's help, she went to court. She told her story. She exposed a system that prioritized revenue over compassion. And Judge Frank Caprio listened. His courtroom proved that day that parking citations aren't just about rules, that a child waiting for her mother isn't a violation, that sometimes the most important thing a judge can do is see the human suffering behind the paperwork. Rules exist to serve people, not punish them. Compassion isn't an exception to justice, it's the purpose. What do you think? Should cities create medical parking zones near hospitals? Should officers who ticket families during emergencies face consequences? Share your thoughts. Subscribe to Order in the Court for more stories where justice sees people, not just violations. Dramatization for storytelling and education, not legal advice or reporting.